Welcome to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax.
Hello and welcome back to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax with Nora Devine. Nora has been a property tax attorney in private practice since 2005. She has developed a statewide practice in all jurisdictions in Illinois, and she represents all property classes. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode focuses on Illinois' affordable housing property tax incentive. This program was designed to encourage developers to include affordable units in new or existing multifamily projects. But like most things in property tax, the details matter. Nora, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What exactly is the affordable housing property tax incentive, and what problem was it created to solve?
Well, they call it the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program. And what it does is it does create a tax incentive, but it does so by reducing the assessed value of a certain, I'm going to say building, because the statute actually says building. And the reason that's important is because I have represented some assets that were like small single family homes, maybe 30 or 40 of them in the same little development. And I believe that the intent of the legislature was to include projects like that, but the word building is in the statute itself. So I'm going to go ahead and use the word building here. Because, and I don't think that the word building should be in there. Yeah. I think that it really should be for a multifamily property, even if those properties may be clustered in a group of townhomes or maybe small single family homes, which is something that's more palatable for some of these communities where the affordable housing developers are trying to do deals. So it's basically if there's 7 or more units and they're willing to reserve some of those units for affordable tenants, meaning these are tenants who make at about 60% of area median income. And so what that means is it's like $46,000 for an individual or $55,000 for a small family. And it's supposed to encourage the preservation of existing buildings. So it's to spur development where they would be doing major renovations of existing building systems of existing buildings. And it's also intended to spur the creation of new structures, so new affordable housing. And in order to incentivize this market activity, the idea is that if they can give them some kind of a tax credit or some kind of an offset or some kind of a tax reduction for a certain number of years, then hopefully that would increase the amount of affordable units that we're seeing.
Okay. So essentially, if you have a building, if you will, that has 10 units in it, so someone, the developer would take 1 or 2 of those or however many they want and maybe don't do as many upgrades or try or keep it a lower for lower income people. That's the idea.
The idea is, yeah, so tier 1 is you would keep 15% of the units affordable. And so that means that the tenants would be at an income level that's about 60% of area median income or lower. Tier 2 would be, you'd be holding 35% of the units in the building for the folks earning at about that threshold. And tier 3, which is really the mecca of incentives, the tax incentives are extremely meaningful at tier 3. You would be holding 20% of the overall units in the building for people earning at or below an AMI of 60%.
Okay. Interesting. Is this something that people are like developers are on board with as a general rule?
It's a really good question. They're happy to know about it. They're happy that it exists. I've asked some of the referring attorneys that send me affordable housing properties to work on. I said, is it the case that these are projects that would not be happening but for the existence of this affordable incentive? The answer I'm getting usually is not really. I mean, they're kind of doing these deals anyway, but it's helping to get more deals done because it's not just providing tax relief in terms of a lower tax bill, it's also providing tax predictability. So they're able to show their lender and they're able to show the government that their project is more feasible because there is a more stable outlook on what the overall tax liability is going to be, because it's pretty laid out in the statute of how the assessment is going to work. And then you know what the local tax rate is specifically traditionally in this area. So you can do some projections that are more reliable than other developers who are constructing new projects that are not affordable housing.
So from Illinois' perspective, is this because there's not enough affordable housing, or are there other motivations?
It's a terrible, terrible situation. We do not have enough affordable housing, especially in some of the more desirable areas. Every 5 years, the Illinois Housing Development Authority puts together a list of communities that do not have the statutorily prescribed percentage of affordable units in their community. And the dirty list is unmoving. The top 20 people on the list are always the same. I think Kenilworth is number one on the list, and then it goes on from there. But I haven't looked at the new list, which they just republished. But I was trying to advise some clients as I was looking at the old list, and if I recall correctly, there were 156 communities. So that means municipalities in the state of Illinois who did not have the correct amount of affordable units in their municipality. So if you do a new project in any of the municipalities that appear on that list, you will be in tier 3, which is extremely meaningful. I mean, it's almost like an exemption from property tax on a new building.
Wow.
It's basically like for the first so many number of years, you're going to have the difference between the assessment before the project began and the assessment after the project was complete. Your taxes are still going to be based on the assessment from before the project began. So in a new construction situation, that's basically going to be the difference between land value and a very valuable new building. And then there are sunset provisions that after a certain number of years, it gets, bumped to a less meaningful incentive. And after a certain number of additional years, it's bumped to a less meaningful incentive. But they're holding these people to a 30-year commitment to keep 20% of those units affordable. So this is a long-term commitment. These commitments do run with the land. So if the seller sells to a buyer, the buyer is bound by those commitments because they do run with the land, and they're recorded on the property.
Interesting. And they won't. And if anyone were to buy it, they wouldn't get the same tax incentives because the big one might have already expired, right?
No, they would.
Okay.
I mean, right. Okay. So, right. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so the most meaningful period of tax savings is up front, but the subsequent step down periods of tax relief are still extremely meaningful. And I think this was really geared toward, there's political leaders in the Chicagoland area who have for a long time wanted to see some of these dilapidated office buildings in the loop to be repurposed for residential use. So in order to attract an investor to come in and do that work and to build that project, basically they have to redo X number of building systems. I think it's like 7 if you want the tier 3 relief. And you have to use union labor, it says in the statute, in order to rebuild all these building systems. And then you get this extremely meaningful tax relief, and it's a difference between the base year and what the assessment becomes like after the project is complete. And so I think there's efforts to try to bring that base year down as low as possible in order to make that relief as meaningful as possible. So I'm not sure what the status is of some of those projects, but there's been many articles written about them over the years. There's some office buildings on LaSalle Street that the powers that be would love to see be repurposed, adaptive reuse to a residential use.
Okay. So what's the process like? How does a developer or an owner apply for the incentive, and what local agencies or assessors are involved in approving it?
Well, first you get IDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority, to certify that what you're doing is approved by them and that it's verified that you have approved these tenants that earn at these levels. And so there is some cost to compliance because you have to track what your tenants earn. You're only allowed to rent those units to people who qualify for the 60% area median income. So there's cost to comply there, and it's an annual burden to show them that you still comply. And then once you have that certification, you show the assessor that you do qualify for the relief. And then if you're tier 1, you get a 25% in the assessed value. If you're tier 2, you get a 35%. And if you're tier 3, you get substantial tax relief. It's the difference between the base year and whatever the value becomes after the rehabilitation or construction is complete.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually wondering about that. Like, so they have to keep up with the income. So basically, if they have a tenant who falls into that category, and all of a sudden that tenant starts making a ton more money, do they have to restructure things?
That I haven't really asked my
Yeah.
clients a lot of questions about that. I don't know like how deeply they inquire, because I think that it is like household income. So if you have like teenage kids, are you supposed to be looking at their income? If you have
Hmm.
adult kids, are you looking at their income? Those are the nitty-gritty details that I don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
So I'm focused on how the assessment incentive works, and the compliance piece. There's other lawyers that are way more in tune with how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. It's an interesting thing. So are counties able to opt out of this incentive if they want to?
Yes, and unfortunately, several have. I have a colleague on the government side who tries to keep up with the list of counties that have opted out. And so when I asked him last, it was maybe 3 months ago, I asked him what the latest news was. And he told me that Joe Davies, Fulton, Moultrie, Adams, Winnebago was where Rockford is. Rock Island, that's one of the Quad City counties, Whiteside County, McDonough County, Marion, Douglas, Carroll, Schuyler, Coles County, Lee County, and Edgar County. So far, those are the ones that have opted out. Winnebago was a little bit surprising because I felt like the Rockford area does have some housing stock that could benefit from the economic activity that could be spurred, from this incentive, but they opted out. And I think sometimes there's bias when people hear the word affordable housing.
Yeah.
They think that's low income housing. This is not low income housing. This is housing that would allow the teachers, the nurses, the truck drivers, the delivery drivers, the service employees, the folks that are making your community run in terms of education, healthcare, and hospitality. It's a way to make it so that these folks can afford to live in your community in a nice apartment. And it's actually a win-win for the community, because there are communities where it's awfully hard to have a nice place to live if you are making the salaries that those types of workers make.
Such a great point. I think you're right. People hear affordable housing and they do think that low income housing, or they think riffraff or whatever their mind goes to,
Yeah, they think it's people who don't have education, don't have jobs,
Yep.
and don't have work history, and that's far from the case.
Yeah.
Far from the case.
Yeah. A lot of those counties, I'm trying to remember Illinois counties. I didn't know all the ones you said, but I feel like a lot of them were on the smaller side outside of Winnebago, right?
Yeah, and it could be that they feel that they don't have a shortage of affordable housing in those broader areas. They may not be on the naughty list that IDA puts out every 5 years. They may be the opposite of that. They may be, 90% of our housing stock's already affordable. Like we don't need to offer tax breaks to spur this activity because we already have, very affordable housing stock here. So that could be another valid reason to opt out.
Does the incentive affect local taxing districts that might rely heavily on property tax revenue, like school or
somewhat, but not more so than a tax increment financing would.
Okay.
It's basically that the school district is going to ask for what they need from the levy. So that's from the property tax. And they're going to get what they ask for from the levy, no matter who's going to pay it. The difference is if these buildings pay a little bit less, then everybody else in the taxing district pays a little bit more. And we see this phenomenon with any kind of tax incentive, including your basic homeowners exemption, including tax increment financing, including, many popular programs that are already functioning in that way.
Does it reduce assessed value, tax rate, both?
It would reduce the assessed value. And anytime you reduce the aggregate assessed value in a taxing district, it does put upward pressure on the local tax rate, which is how they redistribute that tax burden to everyone else. Mm-hmm. So it would be, that assessed value for that property would go down, and then the rate would go up slightly for everyone.
Okay. And I'm curious about the counties that are opting out. Is they're free to opt out? There's no I don't know.
It's a county board resolution. I believe the county board has to adopt a resolution to opt out of it.
Okay.
I think that's how it works.
Okay. Interesting. If from your experience, what's your best advice for property owners or developers who want to benefit from this program?
I mean, if I were in the business of building buildings and things like that, I would be looking for development sites in any of these municipalities that are on the IDA list of not having enough affordable housing. I would be going for that tier 3 relief. I think it's extremely meaningful. And if you could get planning to build in any of those communities, I think it would be a very meaningful tax relief for that project. But yeah, you got to make sure that they want it. I mean, you can't go to a municipality that doesn't want it. You have to have IDA approve it, and you have to be proactive about making sure that your project fits the parameters of how the statute is structured.
I feel like a lot of times, what state, locals, governments, federal governments, they put out these programs, and there's not a lot of follow through, and it doesn't seem to end up working out in the long run. What if you put on your Nostradamus cap, how do you feel this will work in the long run?
Hopefully we'll see more affordable units come online. Many years ago, the model was to build these huge projects that had, all the poverty and all the low income and all the affordable units were all in the same place. This is a model more like what Canada does, which is to, sprinkle affordable units in with the market rate housing stock. And it's supposed to be a better system. It's worked well for them up there. So if we can get this kind of activity going, because what they've done in the city of Chicago really just hasn't worked. It's like, well, we'll give you this zoning approval if you include X number of affordable units. But that turned into, we'll give you this zoning approval, and it's okay with us if you build X number of affordable units like 3 miles west, like, much worse neighborhood. Yeah. And so that's become very politically unpopular. So this is, no, we want the units in this building, in this exact building that we are approving. And so hopefully it will create the kind of housing mix that the political leaders are trying to create.
Yeah. You don't want to see the teachers have to live on the outskirts of where they work, because sometimes it can get a little dicey as you head out there.
Block by block in Chicago, you never know. And I think that the Loop does need more foot traffic. I think it is. I think it's great to bring residential use into the Loop. I think the restaurants would appreciate it.
Sure,
I think any of the services would appreciate having more foot traffic at more hours of the day.
Yeah, outside of business hours, if you're downtown Chicago, other than tourist spots, there's not a whole lot of action.
It's pretty deserted.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, interesting stuff. Thanks, Nora. And thank you for tuning into this episode of Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax. If you own or manage multifamily housing and want to explore Illinois' affordable housing tax incentive, or if you need help navigating all of this, Nora and her team at the Devine Law Group can help. Visit thedevinelawgroup.com to learn more, and be sure to subscribe and leave us a review so other Illinois property owners can find our show. Nora, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.